It's different, categorize man and woman differently than we used to. We recognize that there are different things from each, you know what I mean? So when I look at the fact that transgender people exist, I recognize that the understanding we had of gender completely wrong. Like the sheer existence of them means it's completely wrong. So I recognize that those categories can shift and can change because they're social and cultural categories that have no real basis in any biological aspect. So yeah, that's why I believe trans men and women are men and women.
So, okay, if gender is not defined by your just what genital organs you're born with, what does define gender? How you feel, how you think, or
Well, how you feel would be gender identity,
okay,
but gender in and of itself is more cultural and social than it is biological. Specifically with the way we categorize gendered things, and so yeah.
So when you
it's more cultural and so social.
Okay, so I was raised in the part I'm about to say right now is a little bit gruesome, but it's just how it is. It's a little bit edgy, so please bear with me. I was raised as a boy from childhood. I went to initiation in the mountains. It's a tradition in South Africa. Initiation in the mountains where my foreskin was cut off and I was initiated into being a man. Yes, don't worry. It's not painful. It's not bad. It's just tradition. That's how it is. It's circumcision, but not the Western way, the African way. Right? So I was raised like that. I went to the mountain. I did the initiation. I understood that men and women carry different roles in society. Generally, the men around where I grew up, generally the men would be people who would make sure that there's peace around everywhere. There's peace. Oh, and generally, I grew up in a royal family, so I learned this from my grandfathers, my uncles, my forefathers, and everything. I used to read about them. I understood that men carry a certain role in society besides women. Women generally are very good at nurturing. Women generally are very good at caretaking than men.
What makes women good at nurturing? Like, what biological aspect of women makes them good nurturers?
History. Wait, that's not biological.
Yeah, that's an appeal to tradition fallacy.
Come again?
That's an appeal to tradition fallacy.
Explain what you mean.
So when you make certain arguments, you want to look at the foundation of the argument, and the foundation of your argument is that it is tradition. But tradition essentially is an is-ought fallacy. Essentially, you're saying because this is how it is, therefore it is how it ought to be, which just doesn't really have any grounding or foundation. So that's why it's a logical fallacy.
So because something is how it is, that doesn't mean it's how it's supposed to be?
Correct. You need to bridge that gap on why it should be. Saying that's because how it is isn't bridging it.
So are you saying the people who came before us, our forefathers and everything, were all wrong? So people who lived before.
Do you think that
just to bridge the gap between what is and what ought to be as going. So you're saying everything the forefathers said was wrong. Nobody said that. We said very plainly, you have to bridge the gap between what is and what ought to be with some form of like logical thinking. So that's what we're waiting for from you.
Okay. The logical thinking within all of this is, how is it that I'm supposed to treat someone who didn't grow up like how I grew up, didn't evolve like how I evolved, treating them like me? If you say a trans woman and trans man is a man, right? How is it that I'm supposed to look at that person and say, yes, that is a man, even though biologically we do not actually grow up the same. We do not grow up the same, men and women.
Can you tell me what determines sex?
What determines sex? Genitals.
Yeah.
Are you saying genitals?
So that is incorrect. There's actually 5 biological indicators that determine sex. You have genitals, you have hormones, you have sex gametes, you have chromosomes, and then the 5th one, I believe, is your cell receptors. And so if we look at these 5 points, for example, the SRY gene is essentially what determines sex in utero. And if you have a zygote that has an XY chromosomal structure, the SRY gene can actually jump to the X chromosome and develop now female genitalia. So women can actually have an XY chromosomal structure, and men can actually have an XX chromosomal structure depending on how they were developed in utero. So if we look at these 5 biological characteristics in trans people, you can see that a lot of them do change genitals. They can change hormones, and a lot of how our cells essentially accept or receive information from the body can also have determination. If we look at transgender brain scans, more often than not, their brain actually resembles the gender that they identify with, not the one that they were assigned at birth. So there is some biological evidence to support the idea of transgenderism. There's actually a lot.
Okay, I've heard what you said, and I believe you're wrong. As much as it might be something written or something Googled, I believe you're wrong for the mere fact that just because I can think like a woman doesn't make me a woman.
Well, just because you think that I'm wrong doesn't mean that I'm wrong. This is science. This is not my opinion. This is actual objective science. So I present facts and you present feelings, and that's kind of the difference between us in this argument.
What I'm representing is
no, you're not.
What have I said which has represented feelings in my whole argument?
You presented an is-out fallacy.
You just said, I think, you literally, wait, you just responded to what she said with, I think you're wrong, without providing any clear scientific evidence as to why you're right.
Let me correct myself. She is wrong. And here's the reason why.
Okay.
Here's the reason why. Let me give a reason why.
I'm great.
You are wrong.
Let me hear.
Here's the reason why. Above everything, what you generally come as in this world determines what role you have to play in this world. Yes, I do believe there is a difference where people are attracted to different genders. Fine. But what you come as in this world is what you are born or will be for the rest of time. There's nothing in this world which is created by mistake or created in the fallacy of, you were born with a penis, but you should originally...
Hey, Mello, hold on, Mello.
Hello?
Mello, stop, hold on. Are you a baby?
No, I'm 24.
Are you a baby?
I'm 24 years old. I have a wife.
But you came in this world as a baby. I thought you come in this world as what you come in this world as. So are you a baby?
In the grand scheme of things.
See how that doesn't work? See how that literally falls apart? Like almost immediately?
How can you compare something which is I'm going to live with for the rest of my life with how I come into this world? You're saying, am I a baby?
You are just thinking that sex is binary. And that's where you're incorrect. Sex is on a spectrum. So like, do you think men and women have different brains?
Yes, of course.
Great. So when a trans person, when we look at their brain scans, typically their brain scan and the shape looks like the gender that they identify with. So you having this idea that sex is binary is just incorrect. That is just factually incorrect. It is on a spectrum. If you look at this objectively, you can see, if you truly look at it objectively, there is plenty of biological evidence to support trans people's identities from even a scientific standpoint, not just a social one.
Okay, I did medicine. Here's the thing. I did research on this, and here's what I wanna point out. They look similar, but they are not the same. They might look similar, but they will never be the same. That is what most generally in the medical field we call an anomaly. That's why some people are smarter than others.
It's not an anomaly. It's interesting. Have you read the study?
No, I have not read that study.
It's interesting that you're commenting on the specifics of it and actually critiquing it when you haven't even read it.
Have they ever found a brain that is identical, a female brain that is identical to a male brain? Or have they found similar ones?
I mean, they've never found two female brains that are identical to each other. What's your point?
Yeah, when it comes, it's just like saying, like, do you recognize that women's bodies are all very similar, but no two are identical?
True. Women's bodies are always similar.
So that's the same with brains. So typically men have more mass because they are bigger. If we look at the amygdala, that's typically smaller. I would have to go to my sources to look at the entire list. But my whole point is that there's plenty of biology and science to support transgender identities. And you haven't presented anything to me that refutes that.
Biology that disapproves it.
You haven't presented any of it to me.
She listed you a bunch.
Here's what's this? The gist of.
Let me just read you this really quickly. Hold on. I want to read you this quickly. This is specifically from a textbook. This is from Neuroscience, 2nd edition. It talks about gender, and it says. And is therefore harder to define than genotypic or phenotypic sex, which are the categories Kenzie listed. Generally speaking, gender identity entails self-appraisal according to the traits most often associated with one sex or the other, called gender traits, and these can be influenced to some degree by cultural norms. So yeah, gender is literally self-appraisal, and so there we go.
Okay. I see this argument is not gonna. This debate is not going to progress to a point where you guys understand from where I'm coming. But I understand from where you're coming due to the science and everything. That
I understand where you're coming from. You're coming from a cultural stance, but your cultural stance doesn't disprove science. It's just your cultural stance.
No, I'm not saying my cultural stance disproves science. There is science that disproves that people who transition do not actually feel like it, but it is a mental disability. It's just that I cannot just bring it up right now.
No, there isn't. No, there isn't. You don't know. My guy.
That is actually very much incorrect. Some transgender people do suffer from body dysmorphia, but not all do. It is not a mental illness. And that's very disingenuous of you to present that argument. It shows me how little you actually have researched the topic. I would argue that your stance mainly comes from bigotry.
My stance mainly comes from bigotry. Like I said, like I said before, I put this out there, is that I am coming to you guys as an African point of perspective, in which you guys need to understand that this is how we are taught.
That's why I said your perspective is cultural, not scientific. Yes. Your stance is a cultural
you guys believe
stance.
Science can be wrong?
It's not a stance based. It's not a stance based. I believe science updates and science changes. So you're working with a very old version.
I would disagree with Jovan that science changes. I think our understanding of certain science, we come to a greater understanding from it. But again, I don't think your culture really negates your opinion. If I were to say, I'm just coming at this point of view as a Nazi, does that really do anything for you?
Really, a Nazi?
I'm not saying that you're a Nazi in any way. I'm just trying to give you another cultural reference to make the comparison.
No, a Nazi is not a cultural point of view.
Cite me any scientific source on because I've cited you a direct scientific source from a neuroscience textbook. So literally a textbook of neuroscience and how our brains work. So you cite me something.
This is not something I was reading up on. This is something I was scrolling on TikTok, and I decided to pinch in on it. I can bring it up, but it will take me quite some time to actually find the documents so I can read it up to you. You came prepared.
I'm sorry, what are we waiting for? Are we waiting for a source? I don't understand.
Come again?
What are we waiting for something? What is your argument?
I think I've explained that throughout this whole interaction. But like I'm saying, I don't want to spend up time, for this, because it's now becoming a circular debate where there is no answer, but we're coming back to the same thing and back and back again and back again. One last question. One last question.
No, we presented our argument very well. So maybe I can reduce this down to like a visual. Sorry, Jovan, go ahead.
You can't just go, no, I disagree with your science because I'm from Africa, and here's the reasons why from Africa. That doesn't disprove science. You haven't disproven anything we've said scientifically. You've said it all culturally or socially. You haven't disproven that gender identities exist. You haven't disproven why trans men and women aren't men and women. You're just saying, well, I was raised in a culture that says they aren't. Great, whoop-de-doo. So change the culture because it's clearly bigoted and wrong.
I didn't do it.
He left. I didn't do it either. Like jeepers creepers.
Boom, bitches. We like Jordan and Pippen here with the assist, Duncan.
Like, bro. So the